Is modern 9mm as good as 45 ACP? I actually hear that quite a bit. So I'm going to do a subcompact pistol test to try to figure out some answers here. So I hear all the time that with modern powders, modern bullet design, the 9mm is as effective or maybe even more effective than 45 ACP. So we're going to see if that's true or not. So I chose some loads that are both plus Ps and both have about the same sectional density. So we have our Speer Gold Dot 9mm 124 grain plus P, and we have our Speer Gold Dot 45 ACP plus P, a 200 grain hollow point. And I'm using my Taurus G2C with a 3.2 inch barrel to test the 9mm, and my M&P Shield 45 to test the 45 ACP that has a 3.3 inch barrel. So 3.2 inch barrel, 3.3 inch barrel. It just so happens that 45 ACP is almost exactly a tenth of an inch longer of a cartridge than the 9mm. So that makes this almost an exact perfect amount of barrel travel between both of these. So I'm really interested to see if there's a big difference and how close that 9mm is supposed to be to that 45 ACP through subcompact pistols. So we're gonna go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. That'll tell us if the 9mm is as powerful. Then we'll do our clear ballistic gel test. So I'm gonna go into plain 10% clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are. No denim in the way that can potentially clog a hollow point, no rib simulation that can slow down its penetration. And we'll look at that and we'll just see how those bullets are supposed to work based on how they're designed. Then I'm going to move on to doing more of a real world simulation where I'm going to have 4 layers of sweatshirt on this first 3-inch piece right here that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, then another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh, so when you're talking 3 inches and 16 inches in this gel, it's really more like 1.5 inches and 8 inches in an actual living individual. So we'll do our plain clear ballistics gel shot, then our real world simulation shot, and then I will shoot at the steel target, see if there's a big difference in controllability of those rounds. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 9mm plus P 124 grain gold dot. This is rated at 1220 feet per second. I believe that's through a 4-inch barrel. Let's see how close we get to 1220 through my 3.2 inch barrel here. So 9mm. $11.74, $11.66, $11.62, $11.72, $11.56. So honestly, not that bad of a velocity for being such a short barrel. Now our 45 ACP, this stuff is rated at 1,080 feet per second. So I know from experience, this stuff is a handful even in a full-size pistol. So it's probably going to be a big handful in this little gun. But let's see what we get. See how close we get to 1,080 feet per second with our 45 ACP. 948, 957, 963, 941, 969. So that's still some respectable velocity out of a short barrel. Recoil isn't like, it's not anywhere near like a 357 Magnum, but it's enough that the rough texturing on this grip does become a little bit uncomfortable, but it's not quite as bad as what you would think. So I'm going to say this is pret's powerful. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, so we're doing our plain clear ballistics shot. No fabric in the way that can potentially clog a hollow point. No rib simulation that can potentially slow down its penetration. I do get pretty close on these gel blocks, and I only do that because I am taking 4 shots in here. I want to make sure that I place them as accurately as possible so we don't have bullets hitting each other, stuff like that. So let's see what we get here in our plain clear ballistics shot with our 9mm plus P. All right, and that actually hit that pretty hard for just being a 9mm. Let's see what we get with our 45 ACP. Let's go take a look. All right, so honestly, when you look at this, what we're seeing here, there is a good amount of similarity there. There is definitely a larger track going on with the 45, and I'm going to say the bullet looks expanded quite a bit bigger. But there is some similarity there between both of those. 9mm on the bottom, 45 on top. And when I just say 9 and 45, I do mean plus P. I just don't like saying that out every time. But 9mm 45. A little bit of a difference there, but they both went in straight and they both met minimum penetration here. What we got with our 9mm is we got a penetration of about 14.5 inches of penetration and good expansion. With our 45, we got about 12.5 inches. So we're just barely meeting our minimum with our 45. We're going a little bit deeper with our 9mm, but the 45 is making a bigger hole in there. I'm not going to judge this until we do our real world simulation and see how these really do with fabric and rib simulation in there. So let's do our real world simulation now. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of sweatshirt material followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics. And you got to remember that's half as dense as real flesh. So that's really like 1.5 inches pectoral muscle. So 4 layers of sweatshirt, 3 inches of clear ballistics followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum. 16 more inches of clear ballistics that will represent 8 inches of flesh, and then another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. So let's see how our 9mm does with our real world simulation. Let me set that back up and we'll hit it with the 45. All right, 45 ACP plus P, real world simulation. Let's go take a look. All right, so honestly, not a huge difference what we're seeing in here. They went almost to the exact same penetration depth there. So looking at a rib simulation here, there's a little bit of a difference, maybe quite a big difference in 9mm and 45 ACP with that hole going through there. So both of these did fantastic through short barrels. They really did. And when I put that, I just put the extended grip on that 45 for doing these tests, and I found that with that grip, it's very comfortable to shoot. So from these angles, I mean, the first 3 inches is about the same. From these angles, it almost looks like the 9mm has a wider track, but that's obviously got to be a little bit deceptive because the 45 is a larger bullet. So the 45 is going to be cutting a larger hole. But one thing I can say though is I am impressed by this 9mm, and this 9mm does better than most 9mm. So if I really wanted to make the 9mm look bad, I wouldn't use this one. I'd use some other 9mm and then use this 45, because this 45 is doing fantastic compared to most 9mm through subcompact pistols. But yeah, you know, we had more energy with that 45. It's obviously a bigger bullet, but it does seem like they are performing somewhat similarly. Does that mean that it's going to perform the same in real life against an attacker? Probably not, but in this testing they look similar. And what we got going on here with our 9mm plus P is 14.5 inches of penetration. With our 45 ACP, I'm going to call it 14.25 inches. Very, very close there. Very, very close. But like I was saying, I think that's kind of how a lot of defensive rounds were developed, because you got these different FBI protocols and whatnot. And they will, you know, they designed the ammo to pretty much defeat those barriers and do all these things. So yes, it looks like it's doing good, but I can't confirm that in the real world the 9mm is going to be as effective as the 45. What I can say is that doing ballistic testing, it's very similar. So let's put these out of block. We'll take a close-up look at these bullets, and then I'll shoot our steel and see what kind of practical accuracy and recoil control I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel. I don't have to really tell you which one's which. Obviously, here's our 9mm, and here's our 45 ACP. Both of those performed pretty well for short barrels. But I will say that 45 has quite a bit bigger diameter there. So that's a big difference on how big of a hole that would cut. But, you know, they both expanded really well, so they're both doing really fantastic. Now, going through our real world simulation, this actually does change up things a bit, where it's like the significance of this size here isn't quite as much bigger than the 9mm at that point, because we limited that expansion quite a bit. I would say overall, even if the 9mm does measure about the size of this because of that pedal there, overall there's still a little bit more frontal area with our 45 ACP. So that is going to cut a little bit larger hole through the target, and they both went to about the same depth. So you really can't say, you know, the 9mm did exactly the same as the 45. If they went to the same depth and this one's bigger all around, obviously that's making a larger hole. So yeah, I would say our 45 is just a hair more effective overall because of how big that bullet is. But some people would say, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the extra recoil worth it? I'm going to say in this situation, yes, simply because once I put on my extended grip, I really didn't notice much of a difference in recoil. I really didn't. That 45 has pretty good recoil control. So it really is a toss-up here. The differences, one might say, are insignificant, but at the same time, you kind of want every advantage you can get if possible. So yeah, interesting though. That's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target, so I'm just going to get a front sight picture and pop off these rounds as fast as I think I can hit the target. I'm just going to do 5 rounds of each and just see if there's a huge difference there in my ability to place those shots on target. So Taurus G2C 9mm plus P, 14 yards. See how this does. All right, I did pull one, and I'm going to say that I did pull one because those are some pretty spicy 9mm rounds. Once you get to these power levels of 9mm with the plus P, it starts getting up there. It feels a lot like shooting a really warm 40 caliber out of like my 5-inch M&P. It gets up there. So 45 ACP plus P, I did put the extended mag on here because that did feel a lot better. And I'm going to take whatever advantage I can get. So let's see what I can do with our 45 ACP plus P. I missed a couple, and honestly it's not due to recoil or anything like that. It's that this pistol is brand new. I've been working on the sights trying to figure out where they're hitting, and it just seems they're a little bit off for me. So when I'm trying to do this fast stuff, I am kind of pulling them. Let me fire one really slow to try to do a headshot with this and see if I can do it, just to kind of see where they're hitting for me. Yeah, quite a bit off. That could be me pulling that, but just not getting good with that pistol quite yet. So it's not the caliber that's giving me a problem, it's the actual pistol. I'll try a headshot with our 9mm. A little bit low. That's where they're impacting up close. And I've had this pistol for almost 6 years now, so yeah, I'm gonna be a little better with it. Let me back it up from some distance, just for fun, to see how these things will hit at some distance. All right, 40 yards from the target, our Dick and drill distance here. So I just want to see how these things will shoot over some distance. I'll try to fire slow, try to actually hit the target the best that I can. So let's see what I can do with our 9mm. So I can't tell you why I missed a couple, but then the rest grouped so well. It's probably just me and that trigger. I don't like that G2C spongy trigger very much. Now with this, I'm still working on trying to figure out where these sights are hitting. So I could be all over the place with this, but I'll do my best. Let's fire slow and try to see where I think they're going. Alright, those are hitting to the left for me. The hole a little bit right. So yeah, I need to figure out those sights some more. I did drift them, and then I broke my hex key off in it. It just like broke when I was tightening it, so I had to try to get that out last night. Now I need to find another one that fits it. But I did drift them a little bit to the left to try to match where they're hitting. And I have not successfully got it all the way where I want it. And I think that's really what was happening up close at 14 yards. It's like it seems right to me, and I'm somehow missing, which I shouldn't be. So they're just hitting to the left for me. I know that sounds like an excuse, but I've been doing this for a lot of years, and that's just what's happening. So I'm making a note of it here. So interesting test overall here. So I'm really kind of surprised because our 45, with the power it was working with, I thought for sure it would look significantly better in our gel test, but really it looked about equal to the 9mm, and that's really, really surprising. And this is where things get really complicated, because what you'll see is if you look at a lot of data of real world incidents, there's definitely a discrepancy between 9mm and 45. Every source of data has the 45 performing a little bit better in every regard, whether it's you know, the average rounds fired are usually a little bit less with the 45. The stopping power calculation is a little bit higher. The Goats at Strasbourg test is way higher. There's just all kinds of data that would suggest that most of the time 45 ACP is better, and through hard barriers it's even better than that. But then you have these ammo companies making ammo that specifically can do exactly in a ballistic test what they're looking to do, and it's really hard to calculate that out. Because if you just went 100% by this, you'd be like 9mm as good as 45. And I think that's kind of where people are getting the idea from. And somebody else is going to say, well, this is the best thing we have to know. Yes and no. Because when you actually look at the real world data out there, the 45 is just a little bit better. Even in recent testing, 45 ACP has just significantly better permanent wound cavities, because they will expand out, and a lot of the 230 grains will go real deep while cutting. So overall, in a lot of the real data, the 45 still wins, but in here, not a significant difference. So I'll leave it up to you guys to decide what you think. Once I switch to this grip though, I'm going to say the recoil control of this, it wasn't that much harder to shoot than the 9mm. I'm going to be perfectly honest. Both these pistols, I believe, are 20 ounces. So once we got up into that really warm 9mm at those velocities, it really does have quite a bit of recoil. Because I think what a lot of people are doing is they're shooting a lot of target ammo, and they're not realizing how defensive ammo is a little bit more powerful. And a lot of times what you'll see is like, let's say you'll see a Federal 124 grain target ammo, and you'll see a Federal 124 grain jacket hollow point. They'll both say 1150 feet per second. You'll fire the target ammo, you get 1,000. You'll fire the defensive ammo, you get 1175. There's big discrepancy there. So once you go up to hot ammo like this, the 9mm isn't super easy to control. It's really comparable to this 45. So I'll leave it at that. I'm going on too long with this, but that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.